My name is Rebecca. I am 28 years old, and last month I watched my father's face crumble when he realized he had made the worst financial decision of his life. It started with a phone call. I was sitting at my desk in my tiny apartment in Denver, finishing a report for work, when my phone buzzed. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I almost did not answer. We had not spoken in 3 weeks, not since I found out what he had done. But something made me pick up anyway. His voice was shaky, not angry like usual, not dismissive, shaky. "Rebecca," he said, "there is a problem. The bank says the house is in your name. They say you froze the equity line. What is going on?" I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch between us. "Rebecca," he repeated, louder this time, "answer me. What did you do?" I took a slow breath and said the words I had been rehearsing for weeks. "I did exactly what you taught me, Dad. I protected my assets." Then I hung up. If you want to understand how we got to that moment, you need to know what kind of man my father is and what he did to me when he thought I would never fight back. My father, Gerald, is a retired accountant who spent 35 years working for a mid-sized firm in the suburbs of Denver. He is the kind of man who keeps every receipt, knows every tax loophole, and believes that money is the only language that matters. Growing up, I thought that made him smart. I thought the way he tracked every dollar, questioned every purchase, and lectured us about financial responsibility was just his way of showing love. I was wrong. My mother, Diane, worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office. She was quiet, careful, always trying to smooth over my father's sharp edges. When he would snap at me for spending $3 on a coffee, she would pull me aside later and whisper, "He just wants what is best for you. He worries." But there was nothing to worry about with my brother, Kevin. Kevin was 2 years older than me and could do no wrong. When Kevin dropped out of college after 2 years, my father called it smart business instinct. When I graduated with honors and a degree in marketing, my father asked why I had not chosen something more practical. When Kevin announced he was starting a landscaping business with no savings and no plan, my father beamed with pride and said, "This kid is going places." When I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator at 26, my father shrugged and said, "Marketing, anyone can do that." I learned early that in my father's eyes, Kevin was the investment. I was the afterthought. But I did not let that stop me. I worked hard. I saved every penny I could. I lived in apartments with thin walls and old appliances. I skipped vacations, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and put money into a savings account every single month. That account was supposed to be my escape, my down payment on a condo, my proof that I could build something on my own, even if no one in my family believed in me. By the time I was 27, I had saved $87,000. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to finally feel like I was standing on solid ground. Then I logged into my account one Tuesday morning and felt the floor vanish beneath me. The balance showed 0. Not low, not almost empty, 0. I stared at the screen for a full minute, convinced there had been some kind of error. I refreshed the page. I logged out and logged back in. I called the bank's customer service line, with my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear the hold music. When the representative finally answered, she sounded bored. "Yes," she confirmed, "there was a withdrawal, the full amount, authorized by the joint account holder." "Joint account holder?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "Yes, ma'am. Gerald." I do not remember hanging up. I do not remember how long I sat there staring at nothing. What I do remember is the cold, sick feeling spreading through my chest as the pieces clicked into place. When I was 19, fresh out of high school and still naive enough to trust my father, he had convinced me to add his name to my savings account. "For safety," he said. "In case something happens to you, I can protect the money. I want to help you build something, Rebecca." I had signed the paperwork without reading the fine print. I was 19. I thought he was looking out for me. For 8 years, I had deposited money into that account, watching the balance grow, feeling proud of myself. For 8 years, my father had access to every dollar, and I never once thought he would touch it. I called him that same day. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to ask you something about my savings account." There was a pause, then his voice came through, casual, almost amused. "Oh, that. Yeah, I moved some money around." Moved some money around? Like $87,000 was loose change in a junk drawer. "You took everything," I said. "Every dollar I saved for 8 years. "I reallocated it," he corrected me, as if the word made a difference. "Kevin needed capital for his business expansion. You know how tight things have been for him. He is finally getting traction, and he needed a cash injection." "A cash injection," I repeated, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language. "From my savings, without asking me." My father sighed, the heavy, exasperated sigh he always used when he thought I was being difficult. "Rebecca, do not be dramatic. You have a steady job. You can rebuild. Kevin has a family to support. His business is his future." "And my future," I whispered. "You will figure it out," he said dismissively. "You always do. Besides, you should be proud to help your brother. That is what family does." I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not for him. "Did Mom know?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "She understands how these things work. We all have to make sacrifices sometimes." Sacrifices. As if I had volunteered. As if I had a choice. I took a slow breath, swallowed the scream building in my throat, and said the only thing I could manage. "Okay, Dad, I understand." Then I hung up before he could hear my voice crack. That night, I lay awake in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every comment, every time my father had made me feel small, while propping up my brother like he was the only child worth investing in. For years, I had told myself it was just his personality, that he showed love differently, that maybe if I worked hard enough, saved enough, achieved enough, he would finally see me. But that night, something inside me shifted. The anger did not burn out like it usually did. It hardened into something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. If my father thought I was just going to accept this, rebuild quietly, and pretend nothing happened, he had severely underestimated who I had become. And as I lay there in the dark, a single thought began to form, a question I had never allowed myself to ask before. If he could use my name to take from me, what else had he put my name on without telling me? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I never drank and opened my laptop. My father had taught me one thing, even if he never meant to. He taught me that money leaves a trail. Every transaction, every signature, every account has a paper trail if you know where to look. I started with my credit report. I had not checked it in over a year, maybe longer. I always assumed everything was fine because I paid my bills on time and never missed a payment. When the report loaded, I felt my stomach drop. There were accounts I had never seen before. A home equity line of credit tied to an address I recognized, my parents' house. A car loan for a vehicle I had never driven. A credit card with a $12,000 balance that I had never applied for. All of them listed me as a co-signer or authorized user. All of them had been opened within the last 5 years. I scrolled through the entries, my hands trembling. The home equity line alone was for $140,000. The car loan was for $32,000. The credit card had been maxed out and showed late payments going back 8 months. My credit score, which I had carefully protected for years, had dropped by over 100 points. And I had no idea until that moment. I sat back in my chair and tried to breathe. My father had not just stolen my savings. He had been using my identity for years to prop up his finances, my brother's business, their entire lifestyle. And he had done it so quietly, so carefully, that I never noticed. The worst part was that I remembered signing some of those documents. Years ago, when I still trusted him, he would slide papers across the kitchen table during holiday visits and say things like, "This is just a formality. It helps with the taxes. Your name being on this protects the family." I never read the fine print. I just signed. I called my best friend Mariana that afternoon. She had been my roommate in college and was now a paralegal at a law firm in downtown Denver. When I told her what I had found, she went quiet for a long moment. "Becca," she finally said, "this is not just bad parenting. This is fraud. Some of it, at least. If he opened accounts in your name without your knowledge or forged your signature, that is identity theft." "But he is my father," I said weakly. "That does not make it legal," she replied, "and honestly, it makes it worse. He knew you trusted him. He used that trust to steal from you." The word steal hit me harder than I expected. I had been thinking of it as something softer, a misunderstanding, a family dispute. But Mariana was right. My father had stolen from me, repeatedly, for years. She gave me the name of an attorney at her firm, a woman named Sandra Chen, who specialized in financial disputes and family fraud cases. Mariana warned me that it would not be easy. "Cases against family members are messy," she said. "Judges do not like them. Juries do not like them. But if you have documentation, you have a chance." I thanked her and hung up, then spent the rest of the day gathering everything I could find. I pulled my tax returns from the last 6 years. I requested copies of every document from every account on my credit report. I dug through old emails and found messages from my father asking me to sign things, always casual, always framed as no big deal. I took screenshots of everything. By midnight, I had a folder on my desktop with over 40 files. Bank statements, loan applications, credit card agreements. Some of them had my signature. Some of them had signatures that looked like mine but were not quite right. A few had clearly been signed by someone else entirely. The pattern was obvious once I laid it all out. My father had been using me as a financial backstop for years. When Kevin's business needed money, my name went on a loan. When my parents wanted to renovate their kitchen, my name went on the equity line. When my father's retirement accounts took a hit, my name appeared on a credit card to cover the gap. And every time one of those accounts ran into trouble, it was my credit that took the damage, my future that got a little smaller. The next day, I met with Sandra Chen in her office on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a calm voice that made me feel like maybe this was not completely hopeless. She listened without interrupting as I walked her through everything: the savings account, the credit report, the documents I had gathered. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen against her notepad. "You have a strong case for civil recovery," she said. "The savings account withdrawal is clear-cut. He was a joint holder, which gives him legal access, but the circumstances suggest he misused that access. A court could order restitution." She paused. "The other accounts are more complicated. Some of them you signed willingly, even if you did not fully understand what you were signing. But these," she pointed to a few documents on her desk, "these signatures do not match your handwriting samples. If we can prove forgery, that opens up criminal fraud and identity theft charges." "Criminal," I repeated, "as in police, as in my father could go to jail." Sandra nodded slowly. "That is your decision. We can pursue civil remedies only if you prefer. But if you want to file a criminal complaint, I can help you navigate that process too." I stared at the stack of papers between us. My father's handwriting was all over them, his careful accountant's script next to my name on documents I had never seen before. "What would you do?" I asked her quietly. She met my eyes. "If someone stole from me for years and used my identity to do it, I would make sure they faced every consequence the law allows, family or not." That night, I went home and sat in my dark apartment for a long time. I thought about every Christmas dinner where my father had made snide comments about my job, my apartment, my choices. Every birthday where Kevin got the better gift. Every time I had swallowed my hurt and told myself that was just how he was. I thought about my mother, who had known, who had watched, who had said nothing. I thought about the condo I would never buy, the security I would never feel, the 8 years of sacrifice that had vanished in a single transaction because my father decided my brother's dreams mattered more than mine. And I made a decision. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg. I was not going to let him rewrite this story the way he rewrote everything else. I was going to take back everything he had stolen. And I was going to make sure he felt exactly what it was like to watch his financial future disappear without warning. The next morning, I called Sandra and told her to proceed with everything, civil and criminal, full documentation to the authorities. Then I pulled up my credit report again and started making a list of every account with my name on it. The house, the car, the credit line. If my father wanted to put my name on things without my permission, he was about to learn that names on documents work both ways. Sandra moved faster than I expected. Within a week, she had filed a civil complaint against my father for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and unjust enrichment. She also helped me file an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission and a police report with the Denver Police Department. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a sympathetic voice. She told me cases like mine were more common than people realized. Parents stealing from children, spouses draining joint accounts, family members using each other's identities like borrowed tools. Most people never report it, she said. They are too ashamed or too scared of what it will do to the family. I nodded, but said nothing. I was done protecting my family from consequences they had earned. The next step was the accounts themselves. Sandra explained that because my name was legally on several of my father's assets, I had certain rights. The house, for example, was titled with both my father and me as joint tenants with right of survivorship. He had done this years ago, he claimed at the time, for estate planning purposes, to avoid probate when he passed. What he had not told me was that he had also taken out a home equity line of credit against the property, $140,000, borrowed against a house that was half mine on paper. And he had used that money for Kevin's business, for renovations, for vacations I was never invited on. Sandra smiled when I showed her the title documents. Joint tenancy means you have equal ownership, she said, and it means you have equal say in what happens to that property. She paused to let that sink in. If you wanted to, she continued, you could force a sale. It is called a partition action. The court would order the house sold and the proceeds divided. After the equity line is paid off, of course. I thought about my parents' house, the kitchen where my mother made pot roast every Sunday, the backyard where I learned to ride a bike, the bedroom I had slept in until I was 18. Then I thought about the $87,000 my father had stolen from me, the credit accounts he had opened in my name, the years of quiet theft he had justified as family. How long does a partition action take? I asked. Sandra's smile widened. With the right pressure, a few months. But often, the other party settles before it goes to court. They would rather buy you out than lose the house entirely. I nodded. File it. 2 weeks later, my father received 3 pieces of mail on the same day. A civil lawsuit for fraud, a notice of my identity theft report, and a partition action demanding the sale of his home. He called me 11 times that afternoon. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages started calm, almost confused. Rebecca, I do not understand what this is about. Call me back. Then they grew irritated. This is ridiculous. You are overreacting. We can talk about this like adults. By the 8th message, he was angry. You are going to destroy this family over money? After everything we have done for you? I saved every voicemail. Sandra had told me to document everything, and I intended to follow her advice to the letter. My mother called that evening. Her voice was soft, pleading, the same tone she had used my whole life when she wanted me to keep the peace. Becca, sweetheart, she said, your father is very upset. He says you are suing him. Surely this is a misunderstanding. "It is not a misunderstanding," I replied. "He stole $87,000 from my savings account. He opened credit accounts in my name without my permission. He used my identity to take out loans I never agreed to. And he did it for years while you watched and said nothing." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "He was trying to help the family," she finally said. "Kevin needed the money for his business. Your father thought you would understand." "Understand?" I repeated. "He thought I would understand being robbed?" My mother sighed. "You always had to make everything so dramatic. Kevin is struggling. His business is not doing well. Your father was just trying to give him a chance." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "A chance," I said slowly, "with my money, my credit, my future." "You have a good job," my mother said. "You will recover. Kevin does not have your advantages." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My advantages? I worked 2 jobs through college while Kevin dropped out to find himself. I saved every spare dollar for 8 years while Kevin burned through loans and handouts. I built my credit from nothing while Dad was busy destroying it in my name. I took a breath. "And you knew. You knew what he was doing, and you let him." More silence. Then, quietly, "I did not think it would come to this." "Neither did I said, "but here we are." I hung up before she could respond. The next few weeks were a blur of legal filings and financial audits. Sandra's team subpoenaed bank records, loan documents, and credit applications. We compared signatures and found at least 4 instances where my name had been forged outright. The police opened a formal investigation. My father hired his own attorney, a man named Richard Vaughn, who sent aggressive letters demanding I drop all claims and accusing me of trying to extort my own parents. Sandra responded with a 14-page summary of evidence and a reminder that identity theft was a felony in the state of Colorado. The letters stopped after that. Kevin called me once during this period. Unlike my parents, he did not plead or argue. He just sounded tired. "I did not know where the money came from," he said. "Dad told me he had savings set aside for the business. He never mentioned your name." I wanted to believe him. Part of me still does. But it did not change anything. "Even if that is true," I said, "it does not erase what he did. And it does not erase the fact that you took $87,000 that was supposed to be my future." Kevin was quiet for a moment. "What do you want from me, Becca?" I thought about the question. What did I want? An apology? Money he did not have? Some acknowledgement that I had been wronged? "I want you to understand," I finally said, "that I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this because no one in this family ever protected me, and if I do not protect myself, no one will." He did not respond. After a few seconds, he hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that call. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn my father's approval, all the holidays I had shown up with gifts and smiles, hoping this time would be different. All the times I had told myself that family was supposed to be hard, that love meant sacrifice, that keeping the peace was more important than being treated fairly. I was done sacrificing. I was done keeping peace that only benefited the people who hurt me. The court date for the partition action was set for 6 weeks away. My father had that long to either buy out my share of the house or watch it get sold on the courthouse steps. I already knew which option he would choose. He did not have the money. He had spent it all on Kevin. 6 weeks passed faster than I expected. I spent most of that time working with Sandra's team, reviewing documents, answering questions from investigators, and trying to keep my life from falling apart. My job became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late, volunteered for extra assignments. My manager noticed and asked if everything was okay. I told her I was just motivated. She did not need to know that I was using spreadsheets and deadlines to avoid thinking about my family. The partition hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning in early March. Sandra had warned me that my father would likely try to settle before we got to court. She was right. 3 days before the hearing, Richard Vaughn sent a settlement offer. My father would pay me $45,000 over the next 5 years in exchange for dropping all claims and removing my name from the house title. I read the offer twice, then called Sandra. "He is offering me half of what he stole," I said, "spread out over 5 years, and he wants me to give up my ownership of the house." Sandra's voice was calm. "He is scared. He knows what happens if this goes to court. The judge will order the house sold, and after the equity line is paid off, there will not be much left. He is trying to salvage what he can." "What do you recommend?" I asked. She paused. "Legally, you could accept and walk away with something, but you would be letting him off easy, and you would be giving up leverage on the criminal case." I thought about it for less than a minute. "Reject it," I said. "I want the hearing." The courthouse was older than I expected, a stone building downtown with high ceilings and worn wooden benches. I arrived early and sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, watching lawyers and clients shuffle past. Sandra sat beside me, reviewing her notes. She had prepared me for what to expect. The judge would hear arguments from both sides, review the evidence, and make a ruling. In partition cases, the outcome was usually straightforward. If co-owners could not agree on what to do with a property, the court ordered it sold. My father arrived 20 minutes before the hearing. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders slumped, his suit slightly too big. My mother was with him, clutching her purse like a shield. Kevin was not there. My father saw me and stopped. For a moment, I thought he might come over, might say something, but my mother tugged his arm and they walked past without a word. The hearing itself took less than an hour. Sandra presented our case clearly and methodically. She showed the title documents proving joint ownership. She showed the equity line my father had taken out without my knowledge. She showed the savings account statements, the forged signatures, the credit accounts opened in my name. Richard Vaughn tried to argue that I had consented to everything, that I had signed documents willingly, that this was a family dispute being blown out of proportion. But when Sandra produced the handwriting analysis showing that at least 4 signatures were forgeries, his arguments fell apart. The judge, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, listened to both sides without expression. When the arguments concluded, she removed her glasses and looked directly at my father. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "I have reviewed the evidence presented today. It is clear that you have used your daughter's identity and her trust to secure financial benefits for yourself and your son. Whether or not some of these actions were technically legal, they were certainly unethical." She paused. "The partition action is granted. The property will be listed for sale within 60 days. Proceeds will be divided according to ownership shares after all liens and debts are satisfied." My father's face went pale. "Your Honor," he started, but the judge raised her hand. "This is not a negotiation, Mr. Ashford. You had the opportunity to resolve this privately. You chose not to. The court has made its ruling." She gathered her papers and stood. "We are adjourned." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright March sunlight. Sandra was beside me, already discussing next steps, but I barely heard her. I was thinking about the look on my father's face when the judge announced her decision. The disbelief, the fear. For the first time in my life, he understood what it felt like to have something taken from him without warning. The house sold 6 weeks later. It was a modest home in a decent neighborhood, and the market was strong. The final sale price was $385,000. After the equity line was paid off, after the realtor fees and closing costs, there was just over $90,000 left. Half of that was mine, $45,000. It was not enough to replace everything my father had stolen. It was not enough to fix my credit or give me back the years of savings he had drained. But it was something. It was proof that actions had consequences, even for people who thought they were untouchable. My father and mother moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. I heard through a cousin that my mother cried for days, that my father barely spoke, that Kevin's business had finally collapsed and he was living in their spare room. I did not feel sorry for them. I know that sounds cold. Maybe it is, but I had spent my whole life feeling sorry for people who never felt sorry for me. I had made excuses for behavior that had no excuse. I had told myself that family meant forgiveness, that love meant tolerance, that keeping quiet was the same as keeping peace. It was not. Keeping quiet just meant I was the only one who suffered. The criminal case moved slower than the civil one. Sandra had warned me that these things took time, especially when the defendant was a first-time offender with no prior record. But the detective assigned to my case was thorough. She interviewed witnesses, gathered bank records, and built a case that even Richard Vaughn could not dismiss. 4 months after the house sold, my father was formally charged with 2 counts of identity theft and 1 count of fraud. The maximum sentence was 6 years in prison, though Sandra said he would likely get probation and restitution given his age and clean record. I did not care about the sentence. I cared about the record. I cared about the fact that for the rest of his life, my father would have to check a box on forms asking if he had ever been convicted of a crime. I cared about the fact that his carefully constructed image as a respectable accountant and family man was gone forever. He had spent years telling everyone that I was the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the daughter who never appreciated what her family did for her. Now, the truth was public record. The week after the charges were filed, I received a letter from my mother. It was handwritten, 3 pages long, full of apologies and explanations and pleas for reconciliation. She said my father had made mistakes, but he was still my father. She said family was more important than money. She said I had broken her heart and destroyed everything she had worked for. I read the letter once, then put it through my shredder. Some apologies are too late. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. The criminal trial was scheduled for September, almost a year after I first discovered my savings account had been emptied. Sandra had prepared me for the possibility that my father would take a plea deal before we ever saw a courtroom. She was right again. 2 weeks before the trial date, Richard Vaughn contacted Sandra with an offer. My father would plead guilty to 1 count of identity theft and 1 count of fraud in exchange for the other charges being dropped. The prosecutor agreed, provided my father paid full restitution and accepted 3 years of probation. Sandra called me that evening to explain the terms. He avoids prison, she said, but he gets a felony record. He has to pay back everything he took, plus interest. And if he violates probation in any way, he goes straight to jail. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, staring out my apartment window at the Denver skyline. "How much is the restitution?" I asked. She paused to check her notes. $87,000 for the savings account, $14,000 for the credit accounts he opened fraudulently, $6,000 in fees and interest you incurred because of the damage to your credit. Total restitution is $107,000. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. And he has to pay all of that? Every cent, Sandra confirmed. The court will set up a payment schedule. If he misses a single payment, he violates probation. I thought about my father sitting in some courtroom, admitting in front of a judge that he had stolen from his own daughter. I thought about him writing checks every month for the next several years, watching his retirement drain away the same way he had drained my savings. It was not prison, but it was justice. "Accept the deal," I said. The plea hearing took place on a rainy Thursday morning. I did not have to attend, but I wanted to. I needed to see it for myself. My father stood before the judge in a gray suit that hung loose on his frame. He had lost weight since the last time I saw him. His hair was thinner, his face more lined. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 12 months. The judge read the charges aloud. Identity theft, fraud. My father answered yes when asked if he understood the charges. Yes when asked if he was pleading guilty voluntarily. Yes when asked if he understood the consequences. His voice cracked on that last yes. The judge accepted the plea and outlined the terms of the sentence. 3 years probation, full restitution to be paid within 5 years. Any violation would result in immediate incarceration. My father nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. He never once looked in my direction. After the hearing, I walked outside and stood on the courthouse steps. The rain had stopped and pale sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I felt something I had not expected to feel. Relief. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just relief. The weight I had been carrying for the past year, the anger and the hurt and the constant vigilance, it was finally starting to lift. I went back to work the next day. I told my manager I had been dealing with a family legal matter and that it was now resolved. She did not ask for details, and I did not offer any. Over the following months, I focused on rebuilding what my father had destroyed. I disputed the fraudulent accounts on my credit report and had them removed one by one. I set up new savings accounts at a different bank, ones with only my name on them. I started contributing to my retirement fund again, something I had stopped doing when I was trying to save for the condo. The restitution payments started arriving in November. They were not large, just a few $100s at a time, but they were consistent. Every month, a check with my father's name on it appeared in my mailbox. Every month, I deposited it without ceremony. I thought about framing the first one, hanging it on my wall as a reminder of what I had survived. But that felt petty, and I was done being petty. I was done letting my father take up space in my head. I deposited the checks and moved on. Christmas came and went without a word from my family. No cards, no calls, no invitations. I spent the holiday with Mariana and her husband, eating tamales and watching old movies. It was the most peaceful Christmas I had experienced in years. In January, I received an email from Kevin. It was short, just a few lines. "Becca, I know you probably do not want to hear from me. I just wanted to say I am sorry. Not for Dad, that is his mess to deal with, but for not seeing what was happening, for not standing up for you when I should have. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know." I read the email several times. I thought about responding, about telling him that his apology meant something, that maybe someday we could rebuild some kind of relationship. But I was not ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I archived the email without replying. Spring arrived, and with it, a sense of possibility I had not felt in a long time. My credit score had climbed back to where it was before my father started destroying it. My savings account was growing again, slowly but steadily. I had started looking at condos, not the one I had originally wanted, but smaller places in neighborhoods I had not considered before. I found one in early April, a one-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse near the river. It had exposed brick walls and big windows and a tiny balcony overlooking the water. It was not perfect, but it was mine. The down payment came from the restitution checks and the money I had received from the house sale. It felt strange, using money that had been stolen from me and then returned to buy something real. But Sandra had told me once that the best revenge was living well. I signed the closing documents on a sunny afternoon in late April. The notary handed me the keys, and I stood in my empty living room looking out at the river. I thought about my father, sitting in his cramped apartment, writing checks every month to pay for what he had taken. I thought about my mother, who had chosen silence over justice and lost her daughter because of it. I thought about Kevin, struggling to rebuild his life from the wreckage of a business built on stolen money. And I thought about myself, the girl who had trusted too much and forgiven too easily. The woman who had finally learned that love without respect was not love at all. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was harder in some ways, more cautious. I did not trust easily anymore, and I probably never would again. But I was also stronger. I had faced the people who were supposed to protect me and held them accountable for their failures. I had chosen my own well-being over their comfort, my own future over their expectations. For the first time in my life, I had put myself first, and I was not sorry. A year after I moved into my condo, I received a phone call from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was a woman named Patricia, my father's sister. We had never been close. She lived in Arizona and only came to family gatherings every few years. but her voice was kind, and she asked if I had a few minutes to talk. "I heard about everything," she said. "Your cousin told me what happened. I just wanted to call and say that I believe you, and I am proud of you." I did not know what to say. No one in my family had ever said those words to me. Patricia continued, "Your father was always like this, even when we were kids. He took things that were not his and made excuses for it. Our parents never held him accountable, so he never learned. I always wondered when it would catch up to him." She paused. "I am sorry it had to be you who paid the price, but I am glad you stood up for yourself. Not many people have that courage." We talked for almost an hour. She told me stories about my father I had never heard, patterns of behavior that stretched back decades. She told me about money he had borrowed from relatives and never repaid, about promises he had broken, about lies he had told to cover his tracks. By the end of the call, I understood something I had not fully grasped before. My father's betrayal was not about me. It was never about me. It was about who he was, who he had always been. I was just the person who finally refused to look the other way. That conversation changed something in me. For months, I had carried a quiet fear that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I had been too harsh, too unforgiving. Maybe I had destroyed my family over something that could have been resolved with a difficult conversation. But Patricia's words reminded me that I had not destroyed anything. My father had been building toward this collapse his entire life. I was just the one who finally stopped propping him up. The restitution payments continued to arrive every month. By the second anniversary of the plea deal, my father had paid back almost half of what he owed. I did not know where the money was coming from. I did not ask. I heard through Patricia that my parents had sold most of their furniture, that my mother had taken a part-time job at a grocery store, that Kevin had moved out and was working as a delivery driver somewhere in the city. Their lives had shrunk to fit their circumstances. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. They had made their choices. They had chosen to steal from me, to lie to me, to treat me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. And when I finally demanded accountability, they had tried to make me feel guilty for it. I was done feeling guilty for other people's choices. My life moved forward in ways I had not expected. I got a promotion at work, a management position with a team of my own. I started volunteering at a financial literacy nonprofit, teaching young adults how to protect themselves from exactly the kind of fraud my father had committed against me. I even started dating again, carefully, with clear boundaries and honest conversations. I was not the same person I had been before all of this happened. I was more guarded, more skeptical. I asked questions I would never have thought to ask before. I read every document before signing it. I checked my credit report every month. But I was also more confident. I knew what I was worth, and I knew that I would never again let anyone treat me as less than that. On the third anniversary of the day I discovered my savings had been stolen, I did something I had been thinking about for a long time. I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to my father. Not a letter of forgiveness, not a letter of reconciliation, just a letter of clarity. I told him that I understood why he had done what he did. He saw me as the responsible one, the one who would always land on her feet, the one who could afford to sacrifice so that Kevin could have another chance. He thought I would never fight back because I never had before. I told him that he was wrong, that I had fought back not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to be free. Free from the expectation that I would always give more than I received. Free from the belief that family loyalty meant accepting mistreatment. Free from the hope that someday, if I just tried hard enough, he would finally see me as worthy of his respect. I told him that I did not hate him. Hate would mean he still had power over me, and he did not. I had taken that power back the day I walked into Sandra's office and decided to hold him accountable. I told him that I hoped he would use the years he had left to become a better person, not for my sake, but for his own, because carrying the weight of what he had done would only get heavier with time. And I told him that I was happy, truly happy, in a way I had never been when I was still trying to earn his approval. I had built a life that was mine, on my own terms, with my own money, in my own home, and no one could ever take that from me again. I signed the letter, sealed it, and mailed it the next morning. I did not expect a response, and I did not receive one, but that was okay. The letter was not for him. It was for me. It was the final piece of a chapter I was ready to close. Sometimes, late at night, I stand on my balcony and look out at the river. I think about the girl I used to be, the one who believed that love meant sacrifice, that family meant silence, that being good meant being small. I think about everything I lost, the money, the years, the relationships I thought would last forever. And then I think about everything I gained, the strength to say no, the courage to demand better, the wisdom to know that I deserved it. My father stole $87,000 from me. He stole my trust, my security, my belief in the people who were supposed to protect me. But he did not steal my future. That I took back myself, and I will never let anyone take it from me again.